Oh, let me stop the record.
To today's Making Sense of Employment Research webinar. My name is Alexa Charlie Hansen, and I am a doctoral student at the Center for Psychiatric Rehabilitation at Boston University and the moderator for today's Making Sense of Employment Research webinar. This webinar is funded by the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. The webinar content does not represent the views or policies of the funding agency, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal government. The territory on which BU stands is that of the Wampanoag and Massachusetts people, and we honor and respect the history and current efforts of Native Indigenous communities. This webinar is being recorded so that you can access it later. It will be posted on our website within a few weeks. And also, closed captioning has been turned on, and you can access this by clicking the button at the bottom of your screen. In case this is your first webinar with us, I'm going to introduce our speaker who will share their research with you, and then we will have a question and answer session at the end. Please post your questions in the question and answer box, and I will pose them in order at the end. If you have a technical question, please reach out to me directly or the Center for Psychiatric Rehabilitation directly using the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Also, we would really appreciate your feedback about this webinar, so we will be posting a survey in the chat, and it will pop up on your screen at the end of this session. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Uma Millner, who is going to present her work on thriving at work while living with a mental illness. Dr. Millner is an associate professor in the Department of Psychology and Applied Therapies at Lesley University and a part-time faculty at Boston College. Her overall professional approach is grounded in anti-colonial frameworks and intersectionality. Dr. Millner's research focuses on work and wellness for marginalized and minoritized communities, including individuals with psychiatric disabilities and Asian Americans. Dr. Millner, welcome, and we are so excited to hear from you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. As usual, I left the mute button on. Well, I'm so excited to share this space with you, and it's almost this sense of coming home, because I was a research scientist for almost 7 years. I think postdoc and then research scientist. I was there for 7 years at the Boston University Center for Psychiatric Rehab, and I have to give credit that so much of my thinking and what you will hear today comes from the center and the work I did there, and then carried on into Lesley University, which is where I work right now. So let me share slides, and I just wanted to express my gratitude for the invitation to be back and share how my thinking has evolved. So hopefully this will be a little bit interactive. That was my goal. I don't want to be talking at you the whole time, but we'll see how it goes. Okay. So that is the name of my research lab at Lesley University. I think some of you heard that I'm also actually shifting institutions. So I don't know what shape that will take, but the Mental Health Identity and Adaptability Research Lab is where I did most of my work and have been doing. And also thank you for the acknowledgement of Neidler, who has funded the work that we've done as well. So I appreciate that. Just a little bit of background. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm a child of a refugee father and a mother who came from a very privileged social class. So I have this, what you'll hear in my research too, is this walking of the middle ground, like finding that middle space. So I've like learned to navigate different spaces and adapted to them. And I do, multiple things as a result. So I'm a researcher, I'm a clinician, I'm a professor, a teacher, educator. I'm also a consultant and a supervisor. I currently supervise domestic violence advocates. And particularly I consult on matters of DEI, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice and belonging, which is the J and the B. So you'll see my research intersections here. I focus on work, which is nested within this mental health, larger mental health understandings, within the rubric and understanding of social justice. Okay, so this is our roadmap for today. I want to do a little bit on the pandemic, since we all say we're post-pandemic, but that was a really difficult time. I want to go over a little bit on employment and kind of the thinking in our research lab. And then reimagining work, career pathways, and thriving workplaces. That should be the focus. And then I have a little activity for us to engage in, and hopefully we'll be able to do that even on this webinar format. I have a Jamboard, which I'll do a quick, right before I get into it, I'll do a quick tutorial if we have time. Otherwise, we'll just do this sort of a little bit verbally. Okay, just to get started. So this was a project I did while I was a postdoc at the center, where a lot of my colleagues there helped me analyze the data of a large number of people who had shared their perspectives on what work means to them. And by people, I mean individuals with lived experience. So this is one of those quotes. So work means I have a means to an end. So, survival. Work means I can afford the things that I was never able to afford before. So some degree of enjoyment. Work means I'm helping others and showing people how to recover in their own ways, so giving to other people. Work means I'm finally doing what I was meant to be doing. The work I do means I have found the reason of why I was put on this earth. And this last section, I just kind of want you to think of, well, what does this really mean? So this comes from a very deep spiritual place of meaning and purpose, and being able to give and contribute to other folks and to give back. So let me launch into a little bit of a poll here that I'd like you to do. So the question on this poll is going to be, how would you describe your feelings about your work during the pandemic? So think about the pandemic when everything was shut down and what that experience was like for you. So I'm going to post the, thank you. So so use a one word or an attached phrase. I'm going to actually share the link in the chat box. Alexa, I hope that's okay. It's sort of in the format of a word cloud.
Yes, of course. I'll end that. Yep. There we go.
Okay, thank you. So let me share that in the chat box. Oh, chat. There we go. So I'll send it to you if you don't mind posting it in the chat box, or if you want me to, I can put it in the chat box for everyone else. I can do that. So if you open up that poll, and I will share screen here, we should be able to say, so in this word cloud, what happens is if you have two different words, like if you have a phrase, and if you don't attach it, it'll show up in different places and it won't make sense to us. But you can actually, if you follow the instructions here, you can use your cell phone or you can just use the web to, oh, great, wonderful. So folks are able to post here. So draining, anxious, scary, grateful, defeated, isolating, pointless. Oh, this is going so fast. Wonderful. It was an adjustment. Overwhelmed is something that's coming up for a lot of folks, right? I'll just give it a minute to. Isolating or isolated is a common experience. So lonely, isolated, isolating, Constricted, hard, purposeful, impossible. Challenging, grateful is something that's coming up for a lot of folks. So tiring, disorganized. I think that might have reached the limit. That's why it stopped. Thank you for sharing, all of you. I really, really appreciate it. So some folks, it was good. Oh, maybe we can keep on. Community connection being one. I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. Exhausted, constricting, diminishing, awesome. So for some folks, that was an awesome experience. Anxious, you found something. Maybe it was found challenging or found something. Enjoyment, disorganized, impossible. Time, I think that was maybe two words that got kind of separated. Rewarding, there were tasks that you needed to get done. Urgent, so there was a sense of urgency. Pointless, restricted, okay, difficult. So if we kind of like do the full, kind of a perspective on this, some of us were grateful for not having been affected perhaps as much as other folks were. But in terms of work, we felt overwhelmed, isolated, lonely. It was challenging. It was good for some folks, isolating for others. Poor, you were able to find community connection, and that's absolutely fantastic. So let me actually, okay. So I think in general through COVID, workers were sort of psychologically changed forever. And I don't know if you've heard these terms that have come up repeatedly. The terms like the Great Resignation, the Great Reckoning, the Great Breakup, depending on who you were. And then we had these really, really rapid changes during the pandemic, and work right now is seen as both a source and an outcome of psychological wellness, right? So the boundaries between work and non-work have become more blurry, and workers have generally become more aware of, the characteristics of a workplace that make work untenable. And so then the reason why I share this with you is that people with lived experience have been saying this for a very long time about work, that work contributes to wellness and vice versa. So good working conditions, they improve wellness. Poor conditions, they don't, they affect you, they hurt. And when we feel unwell or experience loss, whether it is our hopes and dreams or of the people that we love, it is harder to work, right? So we did a little bit of a study during COVID. We actually did a large study, and we had a small portion of it that we recently published. And what we found is that individuals with lived experience actually got more jobs during the pandemic. Isn't that interesting, right? So they got more jobs. And but at the same time, they were reporting greater uncertainty regarding work situations, and were saying that they were having a lot of difficulty keeping their jobs. So this is the kind of sample pool that we had, the folks we had surveyed. And what we do know is there's a lot of work precarity. I will go into that in a little bit, but work precarity essentially means that these are entry-level, short-term, unstable, insecure positions with limited labor market protections, right? So we found the
Dr.
similar.
Millner?
Yes, sorry.
Can you share your screen again?
Yeah,
Thanks.
of course. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was just talking. This is the screen. Shut off it. Yeah. All right, I'll keep going. So we also did this thing on education, which we found that it was similar, that people with lived experience were more likely to take leaves of absences from college and were more disadvantaged in terms of their what we call the career competencies, and I'll get to that. So before I move on, I wanted to share this little quote, right? Which one of my favorite authors, Arundhati Roy, who's a writer, political activist for human rights and environmentalist. This sort of gave me life during the pandemic. So I'm sharing this with you. This still gives me life. She said, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. And this is important. Or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. So I found this quote to be really, really inspiring, and it has always made me think, well, what is the world that I want to see? What is it that I am looking for? So I'd like you to take a moment. If you have a piece of paper near you, that would be super helpful. If you can just note down your thoughts. So take a moment to write down, your reimagination of work situations that would help individuals with lived experience not just survive, but actually thrive. Okay. So just take a moment to write that down while I kind of go through some stuff here. So I don't need to share this in detail with you. You know this already. I'm just trying to summarize some things here to make a point. So we know that unemployment rates in general for people with lived experience have been higher, right? There's been little improvement in overall employment rates despite vocational services, which are, really, really comprehensive. And then when employed, service recipients engage in precarious work, menial short-term work without benefits. And then a couple of other points that BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, people of color with lived experience, are disproportionately, they encounter structural factors, so structural barriers such as poverty, racism, incarceration, inadequate access to services. And we also do know that transgender or gender non-binary individuals encounter compounded barriers to work. So what are these sort of structural systemic things? So one of them I already mentioned is poverty. So there's a myriad of barriers that people encounter, and these are what we call contextually driven barriers to employment, right? So what is the context within which, people experience, like people are trying to work, and that's contributing. Those are the barriers that are kind of people are hitting up against, right? So there's poverty includes lack of affordable housing, lack of affordable healthcare. There's isolation, incarceration, social oppressions that are related to race, age, gender, etc., like different social categories, and then inadequate access to competent services. So when we think of access, people often don't have access to the really good stuff, right? And that can be really, really challenging. When we see the research data, it looks so good. The employment services are incredible, but then people don't have access to those services that are done with fidelity and provide them with a comprehensive approach, right? So there's this sort of structurally or systemically, there's a normative assumption that exists that psychiatric symptoms get in the way of working. And then we have environments that are not equipped to deal with symptoms. So basically, we don't know how to deal with the symptoms and issues that people encounter. If only we did, we could fix the issue. And so some of that is what is reflected in what we have right now, right? We have, incredible vocational programming, which is a huge, huge change. And we've done so much more and do so much better than what we used to have. But we still have benchmarks that focus on minimum wage. There are metrics that are binary. So for example, is the person employed versus not? What are their earnings? How many months have they been working? But ultimately, we still are looking for the minimum wage jobs, right? People in these programs are often assumed to be vocational, what we call blank slates, right? So there's no consideration of what are the prior vocational competencies that people come with. Some people have prior work experiences. Some people have caretaking experiences. Some people have other skill sets and talents that are not really in the formal work sphere. But none of those competencies count towards, when you start vocational services, it's almost like you're starting with a blank slate. There's also like a one size fits all, which, specifically I'm saying here, while services are tailored, in general, BIPOC folks and trans folks have a hard time finding the services that meet their needs. So I say this because in one of our studies, what we found that people who are Black, Indigenous, people of color, particularly Black and Latinx communities, they're really focused on having a career. Like they want a career, they feel they're capable of having a career compared to white folks with lived experience, but they're not getting that service that they're asking for. So we then have, some consideration of environmental determinants, but not the larger systems. And I'll get to that in a little bit as well. And then the last point I want to make here is that career development itself is, in the course of my work, I've heard many times people saying, well, people with lived experience aren't capable of career development. And I've had to kind of fight back on that. And also to talk about what it is that we mean by career development. We think of it as a trajectory or a developmental pathway, not as, I want to be an engineer. But career development is so much more complex. It's a process. It's not a one-time deal. And a lot of the programs approach it from a very atheoretical perspective, whereas this vast, vast literature that are applied to people who don't have psychiatric disabilities, who don't have disabilities, these frameworks are applied for folks that are not then translated or provided to people with lived experience. So as a result, what we have is work that people get that tends to be non-permanent, low wage, precarious, non-union. There's usually no training involved in the work. If there is, there's minimal. Opportunities for growth are not always there. Those positions don't always have benefits. And people tend to, because of the limited wages, the lack of stability, etc., people tend to rely on families, programs, and services for additional income or supports and other things. So there's this, kind of corresponding relationship that happens. Not that it's a bad thing, but I'm only looking to, kind of maybe shift our perspective a little bit here, right? So let's try and alter this presumption that we had that I shared with you earlier. What if we said psychological experiences can get in the way of working, that environments and systems are hierarchical, they tend to be oppressive, unjust, and cater to specific experiences, and we need large systemic changes where individuals with lived experience, they don't just survive, but they actually also thrive. Okay, right. Okay. Actually, let me go back to that slide. I just had one more thing to say. So many of us have this limited perspective of work because we don't have access to, when we have these very like particular narratives, we don't have access to the diverse, complex, and rich narratives that have been historically erased. You know, our available systems of knowing about work and workplaces, they're rooted actually in ancestral histories of, let's say, something like racism, heteropatriarchy, imperialism, nationalism, ableism, colonization. All of these are words that are coming up, and you're going to hear them a lot more now. And those experiences they've had, you know, what they create are these toxic kind of hierarchical structures, which is what I was referring to here, among groups of people at the detriment of, at the detriment of large groups of people to benefit a few. So our available knowledge and systems of knowing in general, and this is part of what I call decolonizing, they are in our globalized world, they tend to privilege universalisms. And I put that in quotes. So universal understandings, global understandings. So if I have one thing I understand, I apply it to everybody. And we don't actually value or look at what, you know, again, in quotes, pluralisms or localisms. So what is like community-based understandings or local understandings of how people define, understand work? Work ethics and work understandings and constructions vary enormously across different groups of people, right? So, but then we end up having these sort of white, Eurocentric, cisgender, heteronormative perspectives on work that are held up as canonical truth. So that's, you know, held up as that's the real truth. And then the rest of them, we have to adapt or fix them to bring them in line with that truth. And so what happens as a result, when we uphold like these universalisms, what we ignore, sometimes willfully, is of lived emotional experiences, meanings that people attach, ambivalence around work, unexpected resistances that people encounter when you're providing services. And then the global production of information, like on vocational stuff, on work, is very disembodied. It's disconnected from who we are internally. It's inauthentic. It's like for doing one service for everybody without being able to tailor it, and also not giving credit to the lineage of knowledge that has existed in communities across the world. So that's, you know, to contextualize this altered presumption a little bit as I move into the next stage of reimagination, right? So what I'd love to know is if what I'm sharing with you in the next sections, when you wrote down your little points about reimagining work situations, if they resonate with you, or if you have something different. I would love to like hear that. Okay, so we want to reimagine work and workplaces that are, you know, where individuals with lived experience not only survive, but they actually thrive, right? So we had some years ago when I was still a researcher at BU, we had a program called Opening Doors, which was a research study, but we ran the program. And I can tell you that there were so many people interested in Opening Doors because it was a career counseling intervention. People wanted to know what they like, what they want to do, what their interests are. But then we experienced this significant gap between, let's say, theory and practice, right? So there was, you know, what we wanted to do and what we had this little bubble. And a lot of what people experienced when they came out of the program was this sense of themselves, like who they were. They had increased confidence. They felt they were more capable of doing something. They had more awareness of the internal resources they had and also some of the resources that were outside. What else? They had a lot more motivation to go out and connect with the services that are available. But we had emphasized this career model, right? Which then once they went out, they didn't get reflected back to them in the other services and spheres that they were. And so we brought out, you know, so much energy and effort into doing this work. And then once we got out there, there was not much else to meet the need that we had just created. And it inadvertently, it left me feeling that maybe we cause more harm than good, right? So if we're not making structural changes around the interventions that we're doing that we think should work and should be helpful, they're not, working, because then the outside resources, once people go out into the world, then they're not getting that back to them, right? So that led us to really thinking and contemplating about, well, what is it that we are missing here? So when I think of thriving, there are a few preconditions, right? The one that I will highlight the most, of course, wellness is one of the preconditions. People have to feel well enough. That was something that people shared in my study and one of the studies that I did. But really, I want to focus today on fairness as a precondition of thriving at work. So there are three things that I want to identify here. One is restoring. So, restoring of these multiple narratives, not just focusing on the universal, but also focusing on localisms and pluralisms, access to decent work, and then the structural systems model. So that last part is going to take a little bit of time for me to explain to you, but hopefully you'll stay with me through that. But let me start with restoring. So when I'm talking about restoring, we're talking about restoring multiple narratives. So understanding that groups of people, cultures, have their own stories about work ethic. And restoring means kind of focusing on a few things. So one is interconnectedness, that family, including chosen family, they influence our work decisions, and our community needs as well, right? So our families and communities are really important, and they form an important part of our work lives. Belonging. So when we belong at work and with larger communities and identity groups, that helps us thrive. And for some folks who don't feel reflected at work in terms of their identity, either as a person with lived experience or as somebody who also is BIPOC, trans folks, when you don't have belonging, outside groups, like belongingness outside of work, plays a very, very important role. So we need to think about kind of restoring all of that, right? Restoring or restoring, however you want to call it. Recognizing that religion and spirituality have foundations in our, they form the foundations of our work ethic. So if we're not acknowledging and understanding what these diverse constructions are, we're inadvertently focusing on a very Protestant work ethic, which is all about calling, etc. There's also restoring through the acknowledgement that current and ancestral histories of prejudice, discrimination, and oppression, that has an important role in our work lives. And we need to shift away from these sort of scarcity models and accumulation mentality, which is destroying our planet, towards more abundance, acceptance, and cooperation. So not everything is about competition. It's actually about so much more. Okay. So now I'll go into the construct of decent work that I mentioned earlier. So what is decent work? This is sort of almost, it's going to sound aspirational. The aspiration is of self-determination, that people find work that they love, that they thrive in, that they want. It sounds aspirational. Decent work sounds aspirational to us, is because the reason is that we don't have it. But it is what we should have. We all should have a right to this kind of work. And so decent work is work that is productive and delivers a fair income. It provides security in the workplace and social protection for workers and their families. Offers prospects for personal development, encourages social integration, gives people the freedom to express their concerns, to organize, and to participate in decisions that affect their lives, and guarantees equal opportunities and equal treatment for all. So this is the International Labor Organization definition in the United States. This concept and construct has been brought into the field of psychology by Dr. David Bluestein, who was my dissertation mentor and a close friend. He added a few things. He added interpersonally safe working conditions, stability, and access to healthcare. And then we had our own additions here, that decent work should also include supportive employers, hours allotted for free time and rest, collaborative relationships, compatibility of organizational values with community values, training opportunities, structured and clear redress processes. So where do I file a complaint? So, so we think of decent work as an operationalization of career advancement. This is what we're looking for when we're thinking about the process or progress of career advancement. And so Dr. Bluestein used to use this analogy. He would call work as the playing field of life. And so when we brought this analogy to the people we were working with in the Opening Doors program, this was one of the quotes from them. There was one particular person who reacted pretty strongly to it. And they said, I'm not on the sidelines. Heck, I'm not even in the stadium. I'm somewhere in the parking lot. So that's the degree of exclusion that people feel in terms of work as a playing field. So moving on to structures and systems. And I'm going to try and go through this really quickly in the interest of time. I want us to get to the activity, but just to give you a flavor. So think of structural systems as a matryoshka doll, right? I think that would be familiar to you. That's the picture on the right-hand side. So that's a doll within a doll within a doll, right? Like those are the dolls that we then crack open to come to the next doll, etc. Currently, our services tend to be focused on the little doll that you see in front and then, building up to the last doll. This model, we are suggesting that actually the doll is the big doll. We need to help the person, the individual, by opening and working with the systems to change them, right? So we developed this contextual stage model that we called Career Pathways Framework to understand the career advancement or the attainment of decent work of diverse populations with lived experience. So we centered the lived experience of diverse populations and young adults without trying to make normative presumptions that comes across, and we used anti-oppressive discourse, participatory work, multiculturalism, systems framework, all of that, right? So CPF is this kind of matryoshka doll of a nested process, right? So the first system that we have here is the structural system. So the first one is the structural system. This is where, there's restricted to access to decent work, and that is a product of both marginalizing processes and also counteracting the processes that counteract the marginalization. So those marginalizing processes occur across different social, cultural, political, economic structures. This is what creates what we call structural vulnerability. So from a social, cultural, political, economic systems, they contribute to what are known as joint employment disparities. So it's not just that people with lived experience have these employment disparities, but there's so much diversity within these communities that there are joint employment disparities related to ableism, racism, transphobia, religion-related, faith-based phobias, etc. Right? So that's one. The next one is the proximal social system. This is within the matryoshka doll, you open the first one, you get to the next one. This is the system, which are those functional settings within which people operate, right? So these have either conducive processes or they have processes that are marginalizing, So this community system are those ones which are the living, learning, working context. So these include service providers, educational providers, work opportunities, etc. And they tend to have these are the ones that hold like positive messaging. Yes, you can do this, opportunities for mastery, illness management, like learning by watching other people. So this is the space that sort of holds this, right? So you've probably noticed the little image at the bottom of the little like trajectory, right? The one here, let's see if I can use the annotate button. This one down here. I think you've been seeing this all along. If I can figure out how to erase that and then close this. Yeah. Okay. So this is what I'm going to actually focus on next. So this is the one that we worked on the most so far. That is at the individual level, which we call the career construction system. We have 5 competencies, so individual level competencies that we've identified. These include career adaptability, which is the capacity to navigate tasks, transitions, traumas, self-efficacy, which is the ability to operate in a specific performance domain, work motivation, need I say more? But yeah, so we have a little more specific definition of it. It's actually the perception of choice in decision-making around your careers, despite having constraints, right? Vocational identity is the sense of oneself as a worker, like the meaning that I make of my needs, interests, talents. And then environmental awareness is the knowledge of work supports, what's out there, what do I see as my barriers, and do I know, do they actually help or do they hurt? Oh, so before I go there, you will look at the bottom and you will see that the kind of stage-like model that we have is what we've used for all of our stages, right? The one we've most worked on is the individual level, but all of these go from exclusionary to inclusionary with the structural system. The proximal social goes from inhibitive to conducive. And then this one goes from detachment, like I'm not interested in work, to establishment and maintenance, that I am indeed, interested in work and want to keep going. So we developed a scale based on this model, and I won't go into detail around it, but we wanted to assess the competencies that I just identified. So here are the competencies on the right. These are the stages that we identified, and we use very kind of complex ladder-like models to develop this instrument. I'm happy it's free, it's available on our website. I'm happy to share the instrument itself. But it's sort of, it's a stage-like process. So where are you in the stage, and how can we tailor services to meet your need in that stage? So this is a description of it and what we did. It has both traditional single item, the traditional instrument items. It also has these scenarios, which people tend to, you compare yourself to the situation the person is in and, say whether you're ahead of this person or kind of not as advanced as this person. And we did a lot of testing with this. The scale is working really, really well, has great results. But here is the kind of scoring sheet. So when a person fills out the whole scale, it puts it, a number gets spit out. But usually with most scales, when you see a number, it doesn't tell you much. With our scale, actually, it puts you in one of these categories, and it tells a story to us based on the stages, right? So let me share with you the scores of two real people. So here is Catherine, who's a 41-year-old white female with a diagnosis of bipolar PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder. She has a master's degree and works 30 to 40 hours already, right? So here's Catherine, dissatisfied with work, but kind of coming for services. What we see is that Catherine's self-efficacy, the sense of herself as being capable, is very low. We see that the resources, it's kind of in a medium kind of framework, career exploration. She has a sense of what her internal resources are. In terms of motivation, she is right up there. She's ready to go. Environmental awareness, here Catherine doesn't know what those supports are that she has available. And in terms of herself as a worker, the sense of herself as a worker, she has a very good sense of herself. So what can we do with that, right? So we can tailor our services then accordingly. So here's, in contrast, Justin, who's 40 years old, Hispanic male with a diagnosis of bipolar PTSD and generalized anxiety disorder. We selected these two folks because their profile, the symptoms, let's say, are very, very similar. So Justin here has a high school diploma and has been unemployed for over 2 years and is currently receiving SSI. So in terms of career exploration, like in terms of self-efficacy, Justin is in career exploration. So that means in the medium range, but we still can work on Justin's sense of themselves and their kind of capacity, their belief in their capacity to have a career. With career adaptabilities, their internal resources, their curiosity, concern, control over their lives, that's very low. So that's something we can target and work on. Oh, I'm sorry, didn't need to do that. Yep. Work motivation, again, is in between. We can do some work on that with some strategies. And they're very aware of what helps and hurts them, right? They have an awareness of their environment. And in terms of vocational identity, Justin really doesn't have a good sense of who they are as a worker. And that's, again, with some work, we can help Justin get to the next stages. So what are the implications for a model like this? We need to address the need for cultural competencies and structural competencies. So we talk about structural humility in systems and services, that they're not adequately providing for the diverse needs that communities have. That there's this need to integrate systematic multi-level intervention into employment service models, and then guide research and employment needs of diverse individuals, not just a few. So here is where I'm going to jump into my little visualization that is part of some of the work we did at BU, but also have continued to do and provide as part of the kind of, once you fill out the scale, the services, like this would be one of the activities that would be part of the services. So if you have a sheet of paper or a pen for the activity, if you need a moment to just grab that. And just to explain, the goal of this activity is to help folks really visualize meaningful work possibilities. And, it is possible that over time we have unintentionally limited our possibilities by ruling out our options. Perhaps we thought certain dreams would be too difficult to achieve, or that we weren't capable of achieving them. Maybe someone else told us that they were unrealistic. So this exercise is designed to help you bypass some of those negative messages and assess your own intuitive kind of knowing. So take a deep breath here. And then imagine for a moment with me. Suppose that tonight, while you're asleep, a miracle happens. Okay? And all of your career problems, your work problems, they've all been resolved. When you wake up in the morning, you don't know that a miracle has occurred because you were asleep. But you know that something is radically different, that your life has radically changed. And I want you to take a few moments to jot down, and I'll give you some prompts. I want you to start to picture yourself waking up from sleep, getting out of bed, and getting ready for your day. So just take some time to write a description of what came to mind, and I have some prompts. So I'll just give you a few seconds here. To really get into the visualization. So as you do this, how do you feel? What do you hear? How do you see yourself dressing? Where do you see yourself going? What do you picture yourself doing when you get there? And who, if anyone, do you picture interacting with? So you don't have to answer all the questions, but whatever you want to just jot down real quick. And so then I'm going to ask 3 questions. I had done this on the Jamboard, but I'll put it in the chat box in the interest of time. Maybe, you'll have some things to share. So the 3 questions are, what specific improvements to your working life did you picture? What value would these improvements bring to your work life? And what does your vision suggest about what is important to you? So you're welcome to address any of these. I'm kind of on the fence. I don't know, Alex, if we have time to do the Jamboard, but maybe I'll share it anyway in case you just want to, you feel like putting it somewhere. So let me show you the Jamboard here. And the 3 questions are up there. All right, here we go. I'll show you how to do the Jamboard as well. Okay, so this is the Jamboard. You don't have to have a Google account to do this. You should be able to do it. I'm going to drop the link actually before I move forward. Give me a second. Sorry. Oh, I hope it's, yeah. Okay, I'm popping this in the chats. So you can start to type in if you want to. So the way to do it is either you use the sticky notes that's here. So if you click on those, or if you click on these, you can also just do images. These are images, Google Images. You can just type in a word or something and just put the image in. That's just fun to do. But if you do a sticky note, it puts out a little color, which I like. And you can always put it, you know, in the sticky note, you can write something and even edit it, right? If the 3 little dots up there, you can edit, delete, do whatever works for you. So up top, the 3 questions are on 3 different pages. Oh, this is lovely. Yeah, someone's already posted. Thank you for that. Yeah. Oh, lovely. Thank you for sharing. I can see some of you are having fun with this. So access to open space, given flexibility in restructuring the work week, teamwork, community, a picture of open space, which I love. Oh my gosh, it is very rainy here in New England and cold. Higher wages, great. Less stress and worry. Yeah, flexibility around times when we are well and unwell. No time restrictions. Yeah, I'm somebody who works better and thrives in conditions where I am not restricted to time. More money, yes, I hear you. Yeah. Yep. Higher salary. Yep. So a lot of you are talking about getting more pay. Greater communication. Communication is key. It's very important. Window in office. Yes, so we can look at the beautiful images outside. Oh, I'm so glad you're having fun with Jamboard. Focused and relaxed environment. Yeah. I forget there was this one of these. Thank you for all the scribbles too. That's fun. Yes, you can have fun with it. Access to private space and shared space. Yep. I think good supervision might be one that, you know, good supervisors and people who are willing to work with you. Great. So let me go to the next page. Maybe you have some thoughts you've shared there. Living through the inflation and economic recession. Yeah. Ability to move to better housing. So having better opportunities and a place to live. Work-life balance. Feeling like accomplishing goals. Better mental health. Increased job satisfaction. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is so profound, so much of what you're sharing. Freedom. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Better health. Yep. So sometimes if we don't visualize what we want, we can't make it manifest, right? So having a sense of what you want and how they can help, that's really, really important. So awareness and respect of mental health needs from employers. That is so important. That's what we would put in the proximal social systems, is how employers are attuned to, are aware of the needs of folks, right? Pride in work, and pride in your life in general. It's beautiful. Balance with social roles and mental health. Lovely. Yeah. So I'm going to switch to the next Jamboard, and we can come back too. So feel free to post in whichever one you like. So what does your vision suggest about what is important? So somebody said family, independence, self-determination, enjoying the simple things in life, listening to music while driving, slowing down the hustle and bustle. Oh, you're my people, whoever you are. Family and happiness. Yep. Continue to work in the same way. Work has been enjoyable and makes me feel important as a peer and a person working and teaching skills to adults. Thank you. Thank you. I feel you. Slow living, meaningful contribution to social change efforts, autonomy, competency in many life roles, slowing down. Yeah, I'm going to actually add a little thing here for, you know, if you wanted to share your thoughts on the presentation too, just to me, anonymously, you're welcome to do that since we're actually using this format. So there we go. Security and stability, contentment. Supervision is so important that I think my relationship with my supervisor is as important as anything in my career success. I completely understand and agree with you. Thank you for sharing that. Autonomy, yeah, I think I want housing that I can call my own, decorate how I want, plant what I want. Yeah. So we need to make this manifest, right? We need to make what you're describing here manifest and happen. Bills are covered. I think I didn't get to that the last time. Okay. Great. So folks have continued to share here. And feel free to keep going. It's still going to be up for a bit. I think you can also take screenshots of it at some point if you want. You know, that's accessible to you. But let me just wrap up my presentation here. I'm sorry, we may not have a lot of time to ask questions, but so I'll just skip my summary because I think you have a sense of what I've been talking about. And I'll, talk about the quote that I brought up at the beginning. So how do we walk through the portal lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it? Okay, so that's my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Millner. I do want to open, we do have about 4 or 5 minutes for questions. So if you have a question, please type it into the Q&A box at the bottom, and we will read them. I think a lot of people are just still sharing some really nice hearts and hand clapping. We did get some comments earlier about just some other things that people had noticed that were part of your presentation. Things like difficulties with homelessness as being another kind of social factor that contributes to finding and maintaining employment, as well as the need for affordable childcare and that type of support as well. And it looks like we do have some questions. So the first question is, could you share some examples of structural interventions and how we might act on these wonderful ideas?
Well, I mean, I think this is going to be a collaborative process of developing structural interventions. So what we discussed in our model is that there's already some structural interventions that are there, like the ADA is a structural intervention. So we need to start to think about and imagine what are the structural changes that we as a collective need, right? What do we advocate for? So for example, I would love to see, and I don't know if you'd agree with me, but I'd love to see universal mental health care, right, as an act that's put in place. So everyone has access to healthcare and everyone has access to mental health care, regardless of who you are and where you're from. So that's just one option. I'm sure you'll have other thoughts on how to do this. I do think that the kind of ways in which I'm sorry, I'm going to criticize our politicians for a second here, and please forgive me if it sounds one way or the other, but I think there's a lot of talk and not enough investment. For example, employment service providers and peer providers, they don't get paid enough. We need to really expand on that. There needs to be pay parity for service providers based on their lived experience. So things like that. So, I hope that can get us thinking a little bit. I will share the career advancement inventory. I see the questions about that. Just give me 1 second. Sorry. Just so you know, our website is still under construction, and the resources aren't where they need to be. I need help and staff, and I don't have. I need people who can help me because I juggle a lot of things and haven't been able to get to the resources. But there they are. So that's the career advancement inventory. You can click on it and it should take you. It does spit out your score and a description at the end. So yeah. Oh, I see sorry, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
The quote from the beginning. I think someone's asking for that. Let me share drop that for you. So that's by Arundhati Roy. If you just Google pandemic is a portal, you should be able to find out the whole article. It's so well written. I generally like her writing too.
Mhm. Thank you for posting that.
Sure.
All right, are there any other questions? I think, I speak for many where I thought this was incredibly, just really encouraging to hear that about your work and this interest and this drive to reimagine how we think about vocational services, to expand it beyond what it has been in the past, where it does seem, at least in my experience, to be very one size fits all and not meeting the needs of most of the people who are actually looking for those services. So I really appreciate you taking the time today, and I appreciate all of you for joining us. We will be posting this presentation within a couple of weeks on our website so that you can go back and look at that. And we will also be having some additional Making Sense of Employment resources over heading into the fall and next spring as well. So watch your email for those. And I hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon, and you will be receiving a survey from us as well. And thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Alexa, and the center.
Yep.
Lots of love
Thank
to my
you.
people. Take care. Thank you.